So maybe I tell a little bit about there are really two topics in today's talk, and the keywords are composition and registry pattern. So a talk today is going to be tailored again against the better composition with the registry pattern. And in order to start talking about it, we need to talk about very important concept in Angular and generally in programming called composition over inheritance. So let me explain you a little bit about this. So a composition is when you compose your functionality from classes that become part of your parent class. So a class can instantiate or inject through dependency injection some sort of other classes, could be services or whatever. And that way it actually adds functionality to itself. The opposite of that would be an inheritance in which a class will extend a base class. You see, inheritance has been there for a very, very long time, but it has proven to be quite problematic. One part of it, why extends is limited, is you can only, in most of the languages, obviously there are some different ones, but JavaScript is one of those, pretty much like a TypeScript. So idea is you can only extend one class at a time. So you can realize that having a multiple inheritance system could be beneficial. In some programming language like PHP, you have traits. But in general, you can extend only one class at a time, which creates a lot of problem because people start inheriting because they want to add functionality to the class. But what they should be doing, they should inherit because a class extends some functionality. I'm going to show you some examples just in a second. Another interesting thing about extends is that you create afferent coupling. A lot of times in the code base, you will have a situation where there will be a base class, and that base class will be inherited by many other classes. So the more classes inherit from me, I create more afferent coupling. And coupling is usually bad. You want to have a loosely coupled components, like in my previous talk when I was talking about coupling and cohesion. An idea is very simple. If you have high afferent coupling, it means changing that class will affect many other classes, which means you're probably going to break something. And that's not nice. So there is a situation when you start creating this highly coupled class, everyone inherits from, and then it's really hard or even impossible to change that class because everyone is really scared because they know it's going to affect all the system. So that's another problem and limitation of inheritance. And one more is really, you may very easily break solid rules. Solid stands for 5 different principles. S is for single responsibility, O is for open closed, L is for list of substitution, I is for interface segregation, and D is for dependency inversion principle. So main thing when you start extending from classes just to add functionality, you actually break the responsibilities. You start creating multiple responsibilities in one class, and it's pretty coincidental. And it's very difficult to maintain that code because it's really hard to figure it out why a certain class has some functionality. And then when you only click a couple of extends, you realize, oh, that's why, because there's a nth class in my chain of inheritance, and that actually added some functionality. I'm going to show you an example. And then compositions is easier to maintain in general, because if you want to add or remove a functionality, all you have to do is to make sure you add another class as part of the constructor, and all that functionality is encapsulated in that class. It is also supporting polymorphism in your code. I know it's a lot of buzzword. I really recommend you to actually read this on Wikipedia or some more professional literature, but it's really powerful and it's really important. It took me many years to understand this. But I hope I can get you on the right track. Obviously, I don't expect you to understand it from day one. And then also, composition is the fact that it's easy to replace functionality with a new one. So let's say I have a class and I follow dependency inversion principle, and I inject something in my service, like in Angular. Now I can change the driver of how I actually get that data. It could be HTTP client, or maybe it could be GraphQL client or whatever. And the idea is, if I keep the same interface and it's composed properly, my class that injects that functionality will not need to worry about it, how the data is fetched, because it will meet the same interface, and it means it doesn't even care. You can replace it even at runtime. Okay, so there was a lot of things. Let's go to the demo, because that's going to be a lot more beneficial. Okay, let me grab my screen. All right, so first let's bring it up. Yeah, okay, that's the first example. So check it out. What I want to have, I want to have a service. It's called user service. I called it bad user service because that's not how you should actually do it. And I will show you. I will show you a very basic example first. So I have a service, and that service, all it does, it actually just needs to get an HTTP client, have a function called getUser. I get it by user ID, and return an observable of the user. User is just a simple interface. So what I do is I use HTTP client, I get the user, and then I call v1 users, and I put the parameter for the user ID. This is typical REST. How many of you actually have seen that?
Basically, all of us.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. That's cool. Good. Now, you see, your business comes in and they say, well, maybe business or maybe you yourself decide as a good developer, you say, I would like to log things, right? So I would like to actually add the functionality that if the user was fetched, I would like to log that information. And you might do it because for the development purposes, you want to make sure things are working fine. Or maybe you want to log it because you give it to the users and you want to know when things break. So logging in general is a good thing. So one naive example could be you want to have a function, you want to use the pipeable operator tap, and then you want to log that. And you see you miss this function, this log, and you can just write it here in this class, but that wouldn't make a lot of sense because it's a user service. It has nothing to do with logging. So what you can do, you can write a logger service and you extend from it. And a logger service looks like this. It's just a service, it's injectable, it gets a log, gets the message, and console log. And then you can replace it. This is a console logger. You can replace it with, I don't know, file logger, or you can replace it with cookie logger or local storage logger. Or even maybe you use things like Sentry or Datadog, one of the cloud providers for logging. So you can replace that. It's great. Everything so far so good. How many of you actually seen a code like this and see the value in it?
Actually, I've never extended any services on Angular.
That's good.
Yeah.
And why didn't you do it? Because the choice is good. You shouldn't really do it. But I saw it many times, Actually, when I look at the code, people do it. Because, they think, hey, maybe I want to create another service. Let's call it product service. And I want to have the same functionality. So then I can easily extend the logger service and do exactly the same thing, I can call my products and then log it. So this is why people actually want to do it. But obviously it's not the good way, because eventually someone will come in and say, okay, let's put some user validation, which is another service. You see, you want to put it here, but you already extend the logger service. So one way to go about it would be to decide, because what you want to do, you want to do another tab, and then there is a user here, and then you want to use this validate user, and you want to put a user in here. See, in order to do that, and if you want to follow the same way, you would have to extend a validation service, right? Now, the problem is now you don't have a log, so you would have to make that service extend a logger service. Now, you see, that's not nice. This is not how you should do it. It's because if I extend those classes, a user validation service has nothing to do with the logger service, and the bad user service has nothing to do with the user validation. I mean, it's sort of connected, but it's not directly. So there is a better way to actually do it. This is not a proper way, because as you see, no one will figure it out. You would have to click that file, you go here, then you click that file, then you figure it out here, and then this is a simple example with 3 classes, but I've seen an example with like 50 classes, and that's like terrible. That's really difficult to read. So what can you do instead? Well, what you can do instead is to definitely remove this. Let's just keep it for the example from my GitHub. Shouldn't do this for sure. Okay, so what you can do instead? Well, instead, you can create a good user service and then have HTTP client here, logger injected, and validator also injected, because these are injectables. So they work very well. And then voila, you have a thing like this. And if you want to remove the functionality, you just, oops, sorry. If you want to remove functionality, you just do like this and remove it from the constructor. It's easy. Now this class doesn't have that functionality. Is that clear? You guys get the idea?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
Greg, I know you asked a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Why I don't normally use it? It's because I normally do this. So I've never extended the service before.
Cool.
The only place I've used anything to do with inheritance is on probably for the backend development like Java. That's where I've always used it.
Okay. Yeah. You can use it in the domain models for sure. But I mean, okay, it's good because this is basic. We're gonna go to more advanced example just in a second. But it's good intuition why you do it like this. And actually, Angular, one of the core values of Angular is a composition over inheritance. If you look at in the source code, this is exactly what they do. They created this dependency injection system. This is called dependency injection, and it's working well for you. So if you don't extend it, that's really good. So you do the right way. Cool. So any questions to that part? Or comments? Or am I being silly?
No, it's something actually new that I've learned today. You can actually extend services. I've never seen that before.
You should unlearn that really fast. don't do that. Okay. Cool. So yeah, now we know we should compose things, right? So just add it from here. Okay, so let's look into interesting example now. So let's get to the UI. We build UIs in Angular. So let me show you what I want to build today. I want to build something like this. Maybe I keep it like that. Just a second. Okay, I want to build stuff like that. It's a form. It's not complex form, but it's getting quite big. Oh, actually, just a second. Let me, because I removed one thing real quick. Okay. Good. Yeah, so it's a form, right? It's like I want to create my user. So I want to have an email, I want to have a password, I want to have the address of my user, I want to have his personal data like first name, last name, and the title, and then also his social media profiles, right? So it seems simple, and when you build, obviously this is just an example, right? I mean, in normal life, you can see forms that are dynamically created, and they add like, you know, hundreds of fields, and you know, no one likes to fill those forms. But I worked one time actually in a company in the insurance business, and they've been doing a lot of forms, trust me, because you know, if they wanted to digitalize the experience of actually, you know, registering like a damage in your house and in your car, and they had all the business model in the form. So that was like hundreds of fields. And you see, the problem is when you have a small thing, small form is pretty straightforward, but already in the form which has like credential, address, personal data, and social media, you can already start making some mistakes that will cost you. So what is the goal? Well, the goal is to reduce the maintainability of the system, because if you have high maintainability, then it will cost your company a lot of money to actually build stuff, and it will be making you work on stuff that's not super interesting, because no one likes to, you know, remove code in 20 different files, right? I mean, ideally you would create all in one place and then don't worry about it. Like, you know, it's good. And so how do you know you have a, you know, high maintainability code base? Well, as I say, one thing is, if you want to add one functionality, you have to touch a lot of files. That's a sign of a high maintainability. If you want to remove something, it's not easy to remove it in one place. So it's difficult to, you know, modify it. And then there is also a sign of fragility in a system, which means I change something in one place and it breaks in another place, and that's also a bad sign. So I'm sure we all have been there. I have been there many times until I learned about things like registry pattern. So what is the goal? Maybe let me show you a case first. So how it works is I can fill it up the form. I didn't add any validations, and don't worry about it. Normally I would of course do it, but I mean, just to show you how it should work. Now when I click this, I want to get the information here. So you see, this button here is not part of the form actually, because, you know, imagine it could be in different tabs, or maybe this button could be totally floating somewhere here, which is not part of my component. But the point is, whenever I click that, I need to send all the form data. So I get the access to credentials form, address form, personal data form, and social media form. So do you guys get what's happening?
Yeah, so the button is not part of the form.
No. So technically, I want to move that button up. So, or maybe in some other place, you see, like here, I have like the word standard approach. When you look at the HTML, you see I have my, you know, component, and then I would like to, you know, I have those forms here, right? And then I would like to, I don't know, move this button here above this, and you know, I would like to decouple those forms, because I don't know, maybe I want to add the material tabs, you know, where I can have a stepper, you know what I mean? So the first step will be this form, the second step will be this form, the third this, and the fourth this. You get the drill, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for example, I want to move my button, and I move it here, and then when I come back, you see the button is here. Obviously, I need to fill it up. Let me just do it real quick. I don't need to fill it out, all of it. Okay. And I still get it, you see? But now the button is here, so, you know, it's pretty cool. Now, how would you actually code it? Well, I can tell you how usually people code it and what is the bad practice, and then I can move to the good practice part. Okay, so this is a typical case. So people create presentational components for each of the form, because, you know, if I put it all in one template, it's gonna be very long, and people don't like it. And then you ask people, ask your developers, okay, what can you do to make it look better? They say, oh, let's create a form for each one of these, because, you know, maybe one day someone will want the credentials form in some, you know, maybe a model or pop-up, maybe someone will put address form in like my user section on the website or whatever. So people start creating the presentational components for the form. And that's usually a mistake. Because in order to make it a presentational component, you need to provide an input and then listen for the output when the form is changing. Does it make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So why is it a problem? Well, the problem is that this component is only a template of HTML, and that's usually not a good enough reason to just extract it, because this component, if I want to move it somewhere else to another smart component, I will have to move this component and part of my smart component. So this component doesn't exist on itself. It's not independent piece of presentational logic. That's why it's a problem. So let me give it an example. So for example, how people normally do it is in the smart component, they create a form for each one of them, and it's pretty straightforward. We all have done that. Now I need to somehow assemble the data of those components in one place, right? Because I need to be able to send it all at once to my backend at the end. So this is why they create like like a container for all those forms with the null values. And then they need to create those handlers. So whenever the form changes in presentational logic, they listen to it. If the form is valid, they just set it on this container data. And they do it for each one of them. So they do it for credential, for address, for personal data, and for social media. And then when everything is done, I press that button I just showed you a second ago. And then they check, okay, have I collected all the data? If yes, then send it to the backend. If not, then don't send it. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Now, what are the problems? So let's say your business comes in and says, it's all good, but can you remove personal data for me? So do everything, keep credentials, address, but we want to test the version without the personal data and with only social media, address, and credentials. Can you do it? Sure. You go to the code, and remember what I told you, how many places you have to go to change it. So first, you go to your template, you remove your personal data. That's one place. Now, you think it's good, right? Well, let's see. So let me fill it up. Some data is invalid. You cannot send it. Well, of course, because you just remove a template. You didn't remove the logic for it. So you have to go and remove the logic. Okay, so I go and I remove that logic. So I need to remove personal data form, because you shouldn't leave the not used code in your code base, so you remove it. Then you go out from the container, you also want to remove it, so you do. Then you also want to remove the handler for the change of the form, because that's not going to be used. And finally, you want to remove it from the if statement. So now you removed it. That was 1, 2, 3, 4 places and the template. That's 5 places you have to go. And this is a very basic example. Real life is a lot more complex than this. Real life would have this form, and inside of this form, I would have another form and another form. That's the real life. So you would go to like many different files. Right now, I simplify it only to 2, but it's a disaster. So, okay, now I removed it. Now let me fill it up, all the data. I mean, some of the data. Okay, sure. Now I'm sending it. So I hope by now you can see that's not what we want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So what can we do? Well, the better approach would be to use the registry pattern. So registry pattern, it's a very simple, it's like 5 lines of code. I'm going to show you just in a second. But you want to extract the logic from a smart component into service-like class in which you're going to contain all this logic. And that's great because it's reusable and you can move it somewhere else, and it's pretty cool. So let me show you an example. So the real good way to do it is like that. So It's very similar. Look at this. It's almost the same, but you don't have inputs and outputs because these are smart components. So if I need to input, like think about the logic. This works like a pipe. I mean, you put something and you expect the changes to go out of it. So it's sort of like, you know, I have a data, something magic is happened, and the data goes out. I mean, it's pretty just processing my input. It's not giving me any value. But this one is self-contained. If you open a credentials form, look at this. The form is inside of my credential component, which is a smart component. Then I have a magic called form registry. And then in my own init, I register that form as a part of a bigger collection of things. This is pretty cool because now I can give a unique identifier like the word credentials, and I can put the form I want to register. So now the form registry can register multiple forms. And then when you look into the form registry, it doesn't care about how many forms it has. It can have, like, the idea is it's just a registry. And registry has a register method. And on register method, you just add things to the map on the specific ID. So obviously it needs to be unique. And then you put that form. And then when you want to send it, you do exactly like you did in the previous example. I mean, I just turn the the if statements around, but generally it's the same. Why is it so much more powerful? Well, look at this. So when I go here, let me show you a normal example. So this is this other form right here. So if I fill it up with all the data, I press the button. Sure enough, I get my, all my forms I've been sent. But remember, this is from form registry. It doesn't care if it's called credential, address, personal, if it's only 4 items. No. You can add how many you want. You can add even 1 or 0, or you can add 101. It doesn't really matter. So that's pretty powerful. Why? Because if I want to remove a personal data, all I do is I remove it from the template. I don't go anywhere else. Well, now I hope I will not lose shipping. And bang, I get all my data. Okay, probably there are some questions by now.
Yeah, we'd like to see the code again, especially on the button side there. I need to understand
the button.
If I wanted to validate if any of the fields have been touched before I make the form valid.
Yeah, sure. Where do you think you should do it? You should do it in the container component or inside the smart component for the form?
Actually trying to figure that out. Yeah.
You should do it in one place, which is inside. So if you want to validate, you can put the validation rules in here. And then your question was, what if I want to actually validate it before I send it?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's the rule for all of them, you can go here. And then here I just do the find. And here I have if the form is valid. In the registry, I check if the form is valid. So I don't send the data that's not valid. It's pretty much the same as in previous example. But you mean in your template you would like to tell?
What if, leave alone validity of the fields,
Yeah.
what if you want to check if a field has been activated or with using Preston?
Yeah, sure. So for example, normally what you would do in your template, like you mean like here you would like to say if the form was touched, or you mean like inside the TypeScript component?
Normally, we'll probably, if it's one form, then we'll put it on the button to say if this form is valid or if it has been touched.
Okay. So let's try button, and then I can have a disabled flag, and then I can say form dot get, let's say, email. And then I say invalid, right? So I wanna email. Is that what you're looking for? Wait, it should be a space between attribute and previous. Wait, I have it's my ID. So you have access to the form, so it's exactly in here. You don't have to do. Oh, you mean like on the big button that actually sends it?
Yes.
Oh yeah, okay. I don't have that functionality, but I can show you how it would be done. So let's come back to the previous example, like to the basic one, the one with the old way of doing things. How would you do it here? Well, you would probably have it disabled here. And then what kind of logic can you like briefly explain me again? What would you like? When do you want to disable it?
If none of the fields have been touched.
Okay, then let's say I have a function on empty form or something like this. Oh, you're actually testing me. I'm not 100% sure, but let's give it a go. So in here, since it's part of this big component, I would have to go for all of these controls and make sure they are being touched, right, or untouched. So what I can do technically, I could let's do it only for one form because so it's easier. So let's say I take the credentials form, right? So this credential form, obviously I need to return a boolean. Return this credential form controls, I believe. Actually, not sure. I would have to Google it. If you can help me, that would be pretty. Controls. Let me look for. I don't remember how it's attached actually.
Yeah, it's actually controls, then the name of the control, then the value.
Okay.
Or you're looking at validity?
Yeah, so like sort of like this, and then I would say email in this case, and then touched, right? Yeah, and then I would probably want to do the same. Is that what you want, yes? Cool. So this is the old way of doing the things, right? So there we go. It doesn't look like a disabled state to me. Oh yeah, I have to turn it if it was not touched, right? But oh, sorry. But okay, no problem. Okay, that should be, yeah, now it's disabled, right? Because I touched them. Okay, and normally it would not work like this, it would be the opposite. You would do like this. Okay, so now it's disabled because these forms are not filled up, right? And now it's enabled. So let's do the same for the other one. Okay, if it has to do with managing that button, this button is very tightly coupled with the form registry. And it's good because the idea is it actually represents the submitting all the forms. So let's change it on registry form empty form. Okay. And then I would have to have that functionality on my registry form. So I can say, and then I can say empty is empty. I don't have that function, but let me just bind it in the UI so I don't forget about it. So it's pretty much the same, except that it would have the registry empty form. Cool. And now let's put the logic. It's pretty much the same as here, except that from registry, it's a little bit more tricky, and it's actually easier to do here if all the feeds have been done. But let me say empty. Wait. Yeah, it's empty. Cool. Empty. Obviously, you need to return the boolean as well. And then you say return, and then you do the check like this. So except that there is no credential form per se, you actually register it here. So what you need to do is to all forms dot get and now we agree on the word credentials dot get email, and the same here. I just double check that for you. Yeah, I register with the credentials. Make sure 100% I didn't make a typo. Okay, that should work. Yeah, it's disabled. Let's see if it gets enabled now. There we go. So it's form registry that's responsible for fetching data from all the forms. This is the connector of all my forms. Does it make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if one form has been removed from the lineup.
I mean, of course, as long as it's not credential form, right? Because that will break the logic. But I mean, yeah. But yeah, here we go. I can show it to you. I removed the social form. I removed it. Things are still working. I can send it, and it's all in one place. And it's not part of it. And now let's say I want to make something a little bit more robust. Let's say I would like to not only check if the form is empty for this one, I want to go for all of these controls, right? So you see, if I want to, you see, but that was a very good question actually, because this is another example when I want to add some sort of a functionality, and look how big my class will become. Look, I've only added the functionality for this, right? And let's say I want to do it the same for, let's take another form, maybe the social form, right? Oh, I actually removed some. Okay, but let's take social form. So what I would have to do is, you know, what people would do. They would come here, add another statement like this. They would say social form, get, and then that would be the Facebook, for example. You see, I keep adding lines of code to the same class, and it's already 74 lines of code with the very basic functionality. If I want to add more Twitter and I add more forms to it, it gets bigger and bigger, right? So it's sort of like the compounding effect. The more functionality I add, the bigger class it becomes, and that's the problem. You don't want that. You want to have it self-contained, because now if I want to remove a social media form, there is a sixth place I have to go in order to remove it. It's very easy to lose track of it. So I hope you see the picture. So let's say now I really require email, password, and Facebook in the old way. So here we go. I come here and I say email, password. It's not enabled. Facebook and Twitter, and now it's enabled. Right? Let's see how it would be done in the other example. And I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to say all forms, all fields. So look, it's going to be one line of code, actually. So I'm going to go all forms. It's an array. Sorry, it's a map. So what I need to do is I need to spread the values of that map. And then I need to find the first one, which is not enabled. Which is not touched, right? Because at least one is not touched, well, the button is disabled. So now I go form, controls. Now, if someone can help me, if it's an array, I believe it is. Now it's a, how can I get all my controls from it? From group controls, it's an object. So I believe all it takes is to call object keys, I believe, on those controls. And then I say find. So, you know, I go for all my forms and all the controls inside of it. And as soon as I find one, so here's going to be a control. And if the No, sorry, that's a control key. I think you can use object values, I believe. I'm not sure. So then I say farm controls and that control key if it is touched. Or actually, if it's not touched. And then I find at least one, and then I have to make sure that this is, I can use even filter if I want. And then I want to say length bigger than 0. Yeah. And it needs to be Boolean. So again, this is not. Yeah, actually, what does find return if it doesn't find undefined? Okay. Boom. Well, I guess that it's quite complex, but it should work.
Oh, that's a lot.
Seen worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's a little bit more readable. But remember, I mean, this is multiple forms and multiple controls, right? So, I mean, this is maybe a lot, but you write it one time. But how long would the other guy be? I mean, imagine there's ifs, if. You make one typo here, you good luck. 5 hours, 5 a.m., yeah? No. Okay, let's see where to go. So far, so good. I don't know, maybe. You think it's gonna work? Okay? Yes. And if I remove one? Oh, okay. For whatever reason that doesn't work. I think it's because I do it. Oh, because it was touched before, right? That's the thing. You have to also check for the dirty. Or has value. Yeah. But you get the point. Now I can send it.
Yeah.
Bang. Is that cool?
More than cool.
No, I mean seriously. Like, do you have any
Yeah.
questions or like?
No, it actually makes a lot of sense because I think we have faced it. I've created. There was actually one form I was actually looking at just like an hour before this meeting, and I was trying to figure out how I'm going to go about it. So, and especially in terms of maintaining code maintenance, I think you are right. That's the only way you can actually go about it.
Awesome. Glad I could help. And let me just add the personal data. But thanks for the challenge. Actually, it's been pretty cool. I was not prepared, but luckily it works. Personal data form.
That's how you know you're a good coder.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, okay, I would have to add it again. Okay, no worries, I have it in Git. Oh yeah, by the way, if you guys wanna see the code and stuff I'm doing as well, let me show you the GitHub. You can go to my GitHub. I upload examples like this. I'm still beginner on all those things, but there is on my GitHub you can find the code base. Let me point it in here. Let me make a real quick slide. Here we go. Here you can find it. Bang. So you go to my github.com/g Radzio @angular-mastery. Yeah. Cool. That was actually all I had prepared for today.
Oh, that was pretty intense. Because I think personally, I'm used to actually writing like the normal way of doing stuff, and like, but then having one place whereby it is going to like be checking for everything, it really makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't know about you guys. What do you guys think?
I think most of the time we deal with so many forms, then you end up trying to get even rid of one item from the form, and you end up breaking all the code. So
I've been
it's just it's such a common thing. If you need to do it like that, it's just it's amazing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this whole idea, like I came up with it like I don't know, 6 months ago. I've been coding for 14 years, and like only when I saw, like I think the thing is like developers like to feel productive, right? And I write more code, I'm more productive, right? My boss see more lines, and I'm good, right? And then of course things get complex, but I mean, just be lazy, and don't let this thing happen, because like I appreciate when developers actually have less code, because that means I have less things to maintain. Like recently we removed 20,000 lines of code in one of our repository because it was copy paste, someone before us in the legacy, they just, oh, I don't know what to do, let me copy paste it. I was like, no, it's the same, it's like it's a good thing to remove code, actually.
Yeah.
I think the older you get while coding, the lazier you become. So
The wiser you get.
Yeah, I think it's the wiser you get, because there are projects you'd actually want to do it in the fastest way possible, and you just don't want to think about what you're copying on the other side. So during the copy pasting time, then you'd end up making mistakes if there's so many places you need to work on the same code. So
and you never get time to refactor it also, but you know what's funny, this looks almost the same. The only difference is that the logic goes to this class, and if you look at it, sure, it's like some mapper with 3 lines of code, then there is the send method, another 5, but it's like 20, almost 30 lines of code. This is quite complex a bit, but generally this is like 30 lines. I mean, let's exclude the imports and stuff, so it's like 20 lines. So 20 lines of code are simple, but they are not easy. You know what I mean? That's the thing, that very often people say, oh, it's simple. Well, simple doesn't mean easy, right? You mean easy. You want to do easy, then copy paste code, but then it's not going to be simple in a couple of months down the road.
Anyone else has a question or a comment?
All right. Well,
mine is just a comment, though I joined a bit late. I think with the kind of thought and design patterns we are learning, it's good that we will, as people continue learning, we develop the what can I call it? You're able to mature in the concepts of being able to create a code that is much more decoupled, and it's able to, like Greg was saying, that when you change something, it doesn't break your app everywhere. So you're able to start learning how to use the solid principles effectively. Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think I like that. It's good as we keep on learning these concepts. Yeah. And
I really recommend you to read about Uncle Bob. It's usually Java code, but it's very similar with TypeScript, like in semantics and syntax. So like Uncle Bob is really the guy. And this stuff I showed you today, they developed that like 20 years ago. It's not new. It's been there since 1990s. But I don't know if you guys know, but every year every 5 years, the amount of developers in the world doubles. You know, and especially like in country like Kenya, you know, like you can expect have, you know, mark my words, if we meet in 5 years, there's gonna be 2 or 3 times more of you on this course, because people know there is a, you know, great opportunity career-wise doing coding. But you know what it also means? It means that 50% of coders in the world has less than 5 years of experience. A question to you guys: how many of you have 5 years of experience or more?
I would say I do.
Okay, so we have one.
But at the same time, I didn't know this level of Angular 5 years ago, you know. So things have changed.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for today. I will have to, you know, go to my family, but I mean, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you again next time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Greg, for this, and thank you guys for joining the session. Is there anyone wants to say something?
No, I just want to put it in practice before I will have a question for Greg, probably online, in case I need to snag somewhere. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. I
yeah.
mean, you can know where to find me. Just reach out to him. You can find me on Slack, and be more than happy to help.
Yeah. Anyway, I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us for this session. And yeah, you're gonna find the recording at least by tomorrow in the afternoon on our Angular Kenya YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed, at least please go and subscribe and then check out some of the content that we have. Also, Greg has a YouTube channel, has like amazing content. Personally, I'm learning a lot from his channel on some of the best Angular patterns. And for example, like nowadays, I don't write services the same way I used to write like back like a month ago, which is completely amazing. Like trying to see how you can actually use, how do you call it? Like you have like domain, you have infrastructure, and then see how you can share it all across your application. It's just amazing and mind blowing. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us. And yeah, next we're gonna have another session. And I think we're going to have Greg again for another session. And I think it's going to be about common Angular anti-patterns. So be on the lookout for the invite for that. But yeah, if you don't have any other questions, I'd like to bring the meeting to a close. And yeah, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.